Hi there, welcome to the Wholehearted Business Show I'm. Laura. This week on the show I'm interviewing the lovely Caitlin Bacher. We're talking all things courses and selling your courses on Autopilot. We chat about when the best time to create a course is if you are coaching people one-to-one. We talk about some of the things that might hold you back from creating and selling a course successfully. And we talk all about how you can sell courses without having to launch. Let's dive in. So welcome, Caitlin. I am so delighted to have you on the Wholehearted Business Show. I'd love if you could just tell us all a bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So basically, a long time ago, I was starting to grow my online course business, and I felt really stuck. And I felt stuck because I had kind of been told to, if I wanted to grow my online course business, the best way to do it was through launching. And so for many years, I tried to launch, and I did with some initial success, but I eventually kind of reached a point in my business where things were really stuck for me revenue wise.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I stopped launching and made the switch to start selling my course on Autopilot that I was finally able to really get the traction that my business needed in order for me to meet those revenue goals. And so now I teach this method that I've created, that I've done myself, to sell my own courses on Autopilot to other coaches and course creators all over the world.
Amazing. It feels like I've followed you online for quite a long time as well. Have you been in the online business space for quite a few years?
Yes. So this is actually my 10th year.
Yeah, I feel like I've followed you for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. That's brilliant. And so the listeners of the Wholehearted Business Show, we're talking like health and life coaches, and most of these guys tend to start off like myself as doing one-to-one coaching. And I was just interested to know, kind of in terms of when people whose businesses are focused around one-to-one coaching might start to think about transitioning into the course space, because we all know that courses are more scalable, you can generate more revenue, it could also give you more time and freedom back. And then we'll definitely get into the launching versus the selling on Autopilot, because I think that's a really interesting thing. But have you got any thoughts for people who might be thinking about, is now the right time to start thinking about creating some kind of course?
Yes, I do for sure. So I also started out as a service business, and I was a social media manager. And so I was responsible for, creating the graphics and tweeting and scheduling the posts and all those different things. And after I'd been doing that for a while, I decided, you know what, I would really like to kind of switch to a consulting model, right? Where I was doing one-on-one coaching, one-on-one consulting with people about social media. And after I'd been doing that for a while, after I'd been doing it for a couple months, I thought to myself, you know what? Every single person is coming to me with the exact same questions. And I feel like on these calls, I'm basically walking them through a framework to get clarity around their social media marketing. What if I just put all of this information into a course and, tried to sell it? It didn't mean that I was going to, stop doing all of the one-on-one consulting that I'd been doing, but I did want to, test the waters of doing an online course. So that was the topic of my very first online course, basically about how to market your business using social media. And in creating that course, I made every mistake in the book. I had no clue what I was doing, but people loved it. People loved that course. It was not fancy. I basically created the workbooks on Google Docs and downloaded them as a PDF. I remember at one point, I didn't know how to use, various course hosting platforms. So basically someone would PayPal, like I had a PayPal link for my business. So someone would PayPal, and then I didn't have any automation set up. So I would literally email that person after and be like, hello, welcome.
I'm laughing at that because I can remember doing that. And I think we are so lucky now, aren't we? I've been running my business a little longer than 10 years actually, but I remember back, I had a PDF guide that I was selling. It was my first kind of scaled thing. And it was the same thing. It was like emailing people individually the links. So we're so much luckier now. And I suppose from the point of view of creating courses, the tech is there to make it a lot easier.
Yes,
Yeah.
the tech is there to make it easier. And I mean, at the time, I didn't even know that tech exists, right? Like I was just like
Yeah.
kind of throwing things out there. But the reason why I think that's important to mention is because I think that sometimes, as one-on-one service providers, and perhaps we've taken, different courses, we are comparing our start to someone
Mhm.
else's middle.
Yeah.
And maybe we've taken courses that have really nice graphics, have all these kind of bells and whistles. And so we think to our, as a one-on-one service provider, we think to ourselves, oh my gosh, like, how do I do that? Am I going to be ready for all that? And you don't need all of that. You can certainly get there over time, but
Yeah.
the reality is that when you're taking what you've done successfully with people one-on-one, and you've packaged that into something, uh, people are just going to be grateful for the help. And as
Yeah.
long as, you're in there and you're helping people, answering questions as they go through material, like it really is okay. And you can always make things fancy and pretty later.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's such an important point. And I know you mentioned there about that you made all the mistakes in the book you were saying there when you did your first course. And I also thought it'd be interesting just to explore a little bit about, what you kind of see are perhaps like the myths or maybe the old school traditional business advice that is keeping people stuck when it comes to either getting started with courses altogether or actually making their courses successful. Do you see anything
Yeah.
in particular there?
Yeah. So I think that one of the biggest things that people kind of struggle with when it comes to creating their course is there's a difference between selling what you want to sell and selling what your audience wants to consume, right? And as business owners, like a lot of times we feel like our business is our baby, and this new course is my baby, and I know how to help people and this and that. But it's really, really important that when you're creating, your scalable offer, when you're creating your course, that you're really speaking about problems that your audience is already aware that they have,
Yeah.
and that they actively want to solve. Like they're already scrolling through the internet looking for solutions to solve this problem. And where I see a lot of newer course creators kind of trip up is because they're experts in their field, they immediately they see the problem, they see someone's big picture, they're like, oh well, this is the root cause, we're going to get into that. And the reality is that the person that is coming across your content for the first time on the internet, they don't know the root cause. They're only
Yeah.
aware of that symptom that they're experiencing. And so it's important that when you are, when you're marketing your business online, that you're speaking about problems that your audience is already aware they have and that they're actively looking to solve. And
Yeah.
that's another piece too, because I think sometimes because we want to help people so badly, we we start trying to market ourselves to people who maybe aren't that interested in actually solving their problem. And so we start to, like, our content begins to take a turn, and we're trying to kind of convince people that they
Yeah.
have this problem. It's like, that's a waste of time. Talk to the people who already know that they really
Yeah.
have this problem.
Yeah, that's such a good piece of advice. And you can apply that to all sorts of anything that you're selling, really, whether
Yeah.
it's a course or one-to-one coaching. But I think what I wanted to ask, what I think is quite an interesting thing in terms of, again, that transition from coach to course creator.
Mm.
Have you got any advice for people around the kind of mindset shift? Because I feel like there's something that shifts when you kind of move from
Yes.
just that coaching work to actually, like, I think you feel like you have to be more of an expert, that
Mm-hmm.
you have to have a certain depth of knowledge or maybe even certain qualifications before you can teach on something. Have you got any
Yeah.
advice for people around who might be struggling with that kind of mindset shift?
Yeah. And what I would say to that specifically is that things are going to get better over time. So when you first start making that shift, a lot of kind of the fears and apprehensions that people have are related to, well, if I'm selling a course, like I'm not going to be able to help them. Like they still need my personal, attention, or, what happens if they don't like it, or what happens if they have, this or that problem. But when you're selling a course, it doesn't mean that it's totally, at least at the beginning, that it's totally hands off and you don't have any kind of like support in there.
Yeah.
So the best thing that you can do is put out your framework, put out, whatever it is that you lead people through.
Mm-hmm.
And as the people, your customers, as they begin to implement your course and ask questions, you can then track those questions, and you can initially add them perhaps to like a frequently asked questions section, underneath each video or whatever. But over time, you can then bake those answers into the content itself.
Yeah.
And I think that, a lot of times we feel it's almost like we go into this like freeze response where, it's like, well, what if someone is going through a lesson and they don't know what to do, or they don't know. And it's like, but you've helped people before with this one-on-one. So you just go about it in the same process, right?
Yeah.
Where, except it's with a group call. So someone is saying, hey, I'm having a real struggle with this. And instead of feeling afraid of that person saying, hey, I'm struggling with this specific lesson, I had some questions around it, make them feel safe and invite them in and say, I am so glad that you asked that question, because I'm sure there's a lot of other people here asking that question. Like, let's get into it. And that just makes your course better and richer. And it's not about being, the best expert ever. It's that people want someone relatable. People want to learn from someone that they can identify with. They don't care how many books you've written or how many followers you have on Instagram. They just care about, like, can I connect with this person? Do I trust this person? Do I feel like I can work with this person?
Yeah.
That's really what it's all about.
Yeah, such an important point. And I think it's that almost starting a little bit before you feel that you're ready, because we never get to that point where everything's perfect and we feel perfectly, well equipped to do the course. I think it's just getting started, isn't it, that makes all the difference.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Fab. And then one other question as well that just came in my head before we start talking about launching and autopilot selling, which I'm dying to get into, is a lot of people have questions around, when you're creating a course and you're creating a lot of content that you're going to include in that course that's obviously paid, is how you approach deciding what content you share for a marketing purpose, whether that's on social media or on other places, versus what you kind of hold back on your course. Have you got any advice for people who might be kind of struggling with that?
Yeah. And so I think I would invite those people to kind of reframe their thinking about it in this way. So it's not a matter of sharing too much content or sharing too much value. It's a matter of sharing the right kind of value. And the reality is that your marketing should be setting people up to have a better experience inside of your course. And in order for that to happen, the marketing needs to be focused around helping people or educating people about the problems that they're actively experiencing. What are the mistakes that they're making? Why are they making those mistakes? What's causing those mistakes? What happens if they like all those different kinds of things? What are the, common myths that your like about your specific niche that your prospect has? That kind of content speaks to someone who is at that very first stage in their relationship with you. Now, it would, as much, I know it's hard because a lot of times we're like, well, we just want to get in there and help people. They're not ready for your help. If you were to go in there and let's say you even like made your entire course free and you put it out there on the internet, nobody is going to get results from that. The reason why is because they haven't bought into you as the authority, and they haven't bought into your method. And so it's kind of like pouring water in a bucket filled with holes, right? Like the purpose of your marketing is to kind of create that foundation of trust and to begin to build that connection, so that then as people move through your sales funnel, they become more educated about like what makes your method different and all these different kinds of things. But when you're getting into, like, I get it that, you know, a lot of times we think, oh, well, I should be giving people like lots of tips and tricks and things like that. And it's just going to go over a lot of people's heads. So it's not about thinking, you know, oh, if I share this, then they'll never buy from me. It's like, they're just not going to understand it. They're not going to get it. So like, let's focus on what we can do to really prepare them to then get the best experience out of the program once they enroll.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Yeah, absolutely. And then I know a big part of what you do is help people move away from launching courses, which has been for many, many years, was really the only way that people were doing it, wasn't it? For a lot of years, was doing these big, massive launches. I can remember probably going back to like 2017, 18. And I can
Mm-hmm.
remember people doing like these huge launches, like, absolutely massive, spending thousands and thousands and thousands on ads,
Oh yeah.
been massively stressful, people burning out left, right, and center. What do you like? Obviously, you this is what you help people do, but what do you think keeps people kind of stuck in the place where they think that launching is the only way?
Yeah. So that's such a good question. And I can speak kind of from my own experience, which was back in 2016. You know, I had been, told that launching was the best way to, grow your business. And I had totally bought into that. And I was, trying it despite the fact that my revenue was stuck and like things were very inconsistent. I was just like, well, this is the only way to do it. Like, this is how I have to do it. And it wasn't until I actually met another course creator. He was a guy he created a course that was all about how to declutter your home. And he was making over $300,000 per month without launching. I had no clue that was even possible. Like, I remember when we were talking and he told me that, I was like, what? Like, what is that even? I don't get it. And so he opened up his spreadsheets. He was walking me through, the different data and I was like, I just didn't even know that whole other world existed and that people were doing it successfully. And so for me, it was just about knowing that one person had done it. And if
Yeah,
one person had done it, then I can figure out how to make that happen as well. And like I tell people all the time, there is no one right way to run a business. And there
yeah,
are people who have a launching personality and they love it and they get results for it. And that's totally fine, right? There's some people that sell
yeah,
low ticket, high ticket, mid ticket, whatever. Like, you could make $1 million doing whatever it is that you want to do. But if you're feeling trapped, if you're feeling like this doesn't align with the lifestyle that you want to have,
yeah,
then you can choose a different path. That's okay.
yeah, yeah. And I think that again, a lot of people struggle with launching because it is so high pressure and intense. And how did launches feel for you when when that was part of your business?
Yeah. So kind of what happened when I was launching, I had a young daughter, right? And we were like tiny apartment, young daughter, everything was just kind of really squished together. And it didn't, like, I remember so many times where, you know, I, in hindsight, I see what a ridiculous decision this was. And I see how I was literally putting myself in the most high risk situations. But at the time I was like, okay, like I'm going to go all in. I'm going to spend, $20,000 over the next 3 months to really build my list, build
Yeah,
excitement. I'm going to hire a graphic designer. I'm going to do, all these different things. And I'm going to do this, work really hard for months, 2 months, 3 months, and then open cart for, a 5-day period. And hopefully, fingers crossed, everything will go well. I'll get lots of people to enroll because guess what? Once that cart closes, nobody else can enroll.
yeah,
And then until like 4 months or even a year from then. So you better hope that everything goes perfectly and that you're able to meet your numbers. And things
Yeah.
didn't go perfectly for me. And sometimes things would go awry. And sometimes I would find myself in these situations where I didn't meet my launch goal. And I'm like, oh my God, like goodness, like I'm going to have to now make this work for the next few months. Now I have to scrounge together like another new offer to try to like act as a revenue supplement during this
Yeah.
time. And
Yeah.
it's funny because, you know, like in hindsight, it's like, why didn't I understand that the very thing that I was doing that I thought would bring me success was actually preventing me from getting the success that I wanted? But I just didn't see it. And it really wasn't until meeting that guy that I was like, oh, I didn't even know that was possible. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a different way of doing it. And do you find that there's other benefits to, obviously, I think the benefits to you are quite clear because it's not that high pressure. It's not like, again, spending thousands of dollars in a short period of time to try and hit like a launch goal. But is there other benefits to the way that your business runs, do you feel,
Oh, yeah.
through like kind of autopilot selling?
Absolutely. And I think one of the big benefits that comes with being able to sell on autopilot is time freedom. And like, believe me, I'm not selling some dream of like right off the bat, you're going to be like sipping a pina colada on an island and just, you know, making tons of passive income. Like it's not that. You're still working hard and trying to, you know, get things moving in the right direction. But ultimately, as a business owner, you wear a lot of hats, right?
Yeah.
You are in charge of marketing. If you're doing sales calls, or if you're doing like these big launches, you're in charge of sales, you're in charge of delivery, you're in charge of operations, finance, all these different things. And so if you're a newer business and you don't have a big team where you can outsource those things, then you need to rely on automation, right?
Yeah.
As a newer business owner, like you can't afford to have a big sales team or a big this or that team. And so it's really important that you are very intentional about leveraging your time and
Yeah.
having a system in place that's able to attract and convert your leads for you on autopilot opens up your time so that then you can focus more on marketing and how can I be visible and how can, you know, I kind of refine this, how can I read the data and refine this message to make it convert even better, to get it to get the funnel optimized and up to kind of where I want it to be.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's such an unfair expectation to put on a new business owner that they have to do every single thing. And the more we can leverage our time and the more we can use automation, you know, responsibly, ethically, intentionally,
Yes. Yeah.
the better things are going to be for us. And it's just like, there's so many things that a lot of times we see people who have big teams
Yeah.
doing, but we're just seeing the surface of what they're doing, and we're trying to replicate that in our own business. And it's like, it's not gonna happen. Like it just doesn't.
Yeah, that's such a key point because yeah, I think you can see what people are doing on social media and read the emails, but actually a lot of the time they've got a completely different internal setup for their businesses than what we've got, and it's very difficult to just replicate and try and like carbon copy what they're doing.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And like I even tell people now, my clients, sometimes they'll see me do something. They're like, well, I see you over here, Caitlin. Like, I see you doing this online. Should I be doing that? And I'm like, no. I have a big team. I have a
Yeah.
big ads budget. If I was doing now, back then, it would have broken my business. I couldn't have done it. Like the number one thing to focus on, if your course is generating less than $1 million, is or your service or whatever, whatever your main offer is how do I generate revenue from this consistently? How do I get really good at selling it over and over again? And the problem with launching is that if you launch and you're like, wow, guess what? I need to refine my message. That did not go well. Well, you have to then wait months to try it out all over again. Whereas if you're selling something evergreen, you can make those tiny tweaks over time and and build momentum quicker. And as a new business owner, you don't have time to wait months in order to see if something else is going to work. Like it's time to kind of get in there and start optimizing.
So basically, if someone was like just like first time creating a course, would you say that there's no need for them to launch it? They can just go straight into autopilot selling?
Exactly. That's exactly what I would say. And the reason why is because when you are selling on autopilot, you're collecting data consistently, right? So
Yeah.
you don't, it's not this like start and stop thing. It's not
Hmm.
like, oh, I launched this product and it was a big failure, so now I just have to wait. When you start selling on autopilot, the better things get, the better things get. And so, it's not, you don't just open it up and everything's perfect, that very first week or whatever. It does take time to kind of like tinker and tweak and knowing how to read the data, how to interpret it, all of that is a skill in itself, but
Yeah.
it's a skill. That means anyone can learn it and you can get better at it over time.
Yeah.
And the best way to increase your revenue is by making those tiny tweaks over time. And I think if, for anyone out there who feels like, what, they've been launching, but their revenue is stuck, that was exactly where I was. And if you feel like your revenue is stuck, switching to an evergreen model could be a great way for you to really start to build some traction and momentum.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an amazing piece of advice. And I think it's that those often it feels like you have to, if something's not working, that you throw everything out and think
Yes.
that it's the entire thing. But actually, it's such an important point that it's those little tweaks over time that actually make
Mhm.
the biggest difference. And I think so often people do kind of get to that point. I know this has been me in the past as well, where it's been like, oh, well, this hasn't launched well or whatever. And I just think, oh, it's the whole thing's terrible. I'm going to just get rid of it all.
Yep.
But actually, probably what would have been a much better approach is to do those little tweaks and actually look at the data, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things though about looking at the data is that you really have to be on top of managing your emotions around that. And I think that one of the
Yeah.
biggest mindset shifts that people really have to make when it comes to switching from a launch model to, selling evergreen is that you really have two jobs, right? Number one, manage your emotions. Number two, measure your results. And there's no way you're going to be able to objectively look at the data, measure your results, decide what to tweak if you're not managing your emotions around that. And
Yeah.
that is hard. It's hard
Yeah.
to manage your emotions because if something isn't working in that moment, like, I mean, I've done it a million times where I start to spiral and I'm like, my gosh, it's not working now. And that means that it'll never work. And that means that this and this and that. And it's like, it's, it's up to us as leaders of our business to really take some personal accountability for managing our emotions. And there's no, a lot of times people have it backwards and they think, oh, but if I get this to work, then I'll be clear headed. Then I won't feel anxious. Then I won't
Yeah.
feel this or that. But it's like, no, you're never going to get there if you're stuck in those like that foggy environment from the get go. And the other thing I will say too is part of taking personal accountability is asking for help. And
Yeah.
I know for women, especially, a lot of times when we hear personal accountability, personal responsibility, a lot of times we can interpret that to mean that we have to then take everything on and do
Yeah.
everything ourselves. But it's not that at all. Like if the success of your company is up to you, then be willing to ask for help and to be vulnerable and raise your hand and say, hey, like this is not making sense for me.
Yeah, I was just about to ask a bit about mindset shifts because obviously you've got a multi-million dollar revenue
Mhm.
company in terms of what those mindset shifts have helped you get to that level of revenue. And I think what you've already said there about the managing your emotions and managing your results is really, really key. And every time I speak to someone who is at that level of revenue, there's something there about looking at the data and
Mhm.
about having that head on. But is there anything else that comes that you feel has
Yeah.
been instrumental in you getting to this level of revenue in your business?
I think it's really beginning to understand that there are problems at every single level of business, right? And so to kind of reframe the way that you think about encountering a problem and really seeing it as an opportunity to get better. Because when you're first, when you're working towards, your first 6-figure year in business or whatever, you're going to have to be willing to navigate the waters and to overcome making, $100 mistake or $1,000 mistake. But then once you're getting to $1 million, you need to be able to overcome making a $10,000 mistake. Then it's past $1 million, you're making $100,000 mistakes, you're making $1 million mistakes. And so it's all practice. That $100 mistake, that $1,000 mistake, that $10,000 mistake, it's all setting you up to be stronger if you remain committed to achieving your goals and you work through it, right? By asking for help, by reframing your thoughts, by kind of getting to where you need to go, and not diving into like a shame spiral of, oh man, well, I remember, in 4 years ago, I made that $1,000 mistake. And so that just taught me a lot, and I will never take another risk again. I will never do anything. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not about that. The problems will never disappear. You get the problems that you solve. It might be easier to solve those problems, but that's not because the problems are getting smaller. It's because you're getting stronger.
Yeah, that's such good advice. Brilliant. Thank you so much for all of your wisdom that you've shared today. And I always like to wrap up an episode of the show by asking my guests what their version of success is. So we're really big here on really tuning into what our own versions of success are, not just chasing numbers or chasing what we think everyone else's version of success is, but what it is for us. But what's your version of success, Caitlin?
Yeah. So I think that being able to walk in my purpose and to make a positive impact in the lives of others is my definition of success. And, I kind of the thing that I always come back to for myself is that I really do help people stop thinking, like, let go of why they can't and think about how they can. Like, how can you make this happen? There are always a million reasons why you can't do something. But what if we shifted our attention and we thought about, well, how can you make this possible? And so all the little ways that I'm able to do that, whether it's with my family or my clients or my neighbor, it's just like, it fills me up, and it feels incredible.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much. So I've got all of your links. We'll put all of your links in the description for people to find you. You've got a masterclass as well. Is that right?
Yes. So if you go to my website, CaitlinBacher.com, there's a free masterclass on there. It's called How to Generate Launch-Sized Revenue Without Launching. And I have a podcast on there as well. So,
amazing. Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.